Animind, an anime podcast where we nerd out about all things anime and dive deeply into the storytelling art form while dissecting the psychological aspects that it speaks to. I'm your co-host, Danny Ari.
And I'm your co-host, Graham Pugh.
And I'm your third co-host, Matthew Basil. And welcome to the premiere, episode 1 of our second season of Animind. We are back from hiatus. How was everyone's break?
I lived through it.
You lived through it. That's good.
So there's that. Even though the universe didn't want us to record this season.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Sicknesses and all other things.
2 or 3 weeks, was it?
Yeah.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. Apparently the Animind crew partied a little too hard over their hiatus. And
yeah, rolled so hard that I got a lung infection.
Yeah, I got a sinus infection.
Yep.
Graham, what infection did you get?
Question.
But yeah, we did finally crawl back from hiatus, and we are back here to once again talk anime, talk psychology, talk mental health, talk all those fun things. I know we have some special requests this season, which will be cool. I think that's first for us. So we're talking a lot of demons, I think, this season, I've been told. For those of you who are just joining the party here for this episode, I am fairly new to anime. I was introduced to it last season, so I've only seen, 12, 13, I think, episodes we did last season.
It's been a fun journey for us.
Yeah, so, but I'm told we got a lot of demons coming up this season.
Yeah, I've already started watching one of the series that we're going to watch later.
Which one?
Chainsaw Man. It's
okay.
The second episode on Tuesday.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to being able to cover that.
Yeah, I'm excited about covering that too. I remember you sent us the trailer last season, and I was like, wow, okay, I don't know what I just watched, but I know I want to watch it.
Yeah, the art seems really exciting, at least from the manga that I've kind of browsed a little bit. I haven't really gotten into it because I haven't had the time, but I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. It definitely holds up, like, visually.
Awesome. Yeah, well, so look forward to that. We will be doing a Chainsaw Man episode in another couple months. We just wanted to wait till that season got fully underway so everyone could get caught up, because it's the first season, right? They just released it. There you go. See, I'm learning my anime. I'm getting into the community here. But in this episode, we will be talking. See, I'm going to butcher his name. I was saying in my head all day today to prepare. Hayao Miyazaki. Did I get that close? There you go. We're going to be talking about Hayao Miyazaki film, Howls-Moving-Castle. For those of you who were with us for season 1, you know all three of us are huge fans of his, so I hope you don't mind, but we're probably going to be doing at least a movie, if not 2 or 3, every season of his until we run out. So we're going to be starting with Howls-Moving-Castle this season. So let's jump right into it. I don't know if you two saw it. I mean, this was new for me, obviously.
Yeah, it was new for me as well, as much as I had heard a lot of my friends talking about it, because I was like, I think one of the first ones I ever watched was Ponyo, and the one we did last, Spirited Away, were my first 2 that I had actually seen. So I haven't seen Kiki's Delivery Service either. There's a couple that I was meaning to watch, and this was one of them, especially because all my friends have cosplayed Howl at some point, and now I see why.
Yeah, you get it, right?
Oh boy!
I feel like you like Kiki, especially.
I do like cats. I like cats and broody boys. So, you know.
So Kiki's Delivery Service will be coming up in the near future.
So how did everybody like it?
I've seen it before. I grew up watching this movie a lot because it was my sister's favorite Studio Ghibli movie, and I always enjoy being able to watch it. I want to hear, since it was your first time for you guys, how you liked it.
I liked it a lot. My cat wanted to be part, so I muted myself, and then I forgot to unmute my story. Anyway, I thought it was really good. I really appreciate character development. We've talked about this a billion times, but as a writer, character development is so important to me, and seeing why characters are the way they are and how they change over time. And I love metaphors and the way that they changed physically, as well as like their characterization as well. Like everything kind of grew and changed, and these metamorphoses, like, it was so good. It was just poetic to watch, and as usual, the art was beautiful, and the music was great, and just the setting in general was just very enjoyable. Like, I want to watch it again when it's like raining and just curl up, cozy up. It sounds great, but I loved it.
Yeah, it is a nice cozy up movie. I will give you that. It's a nice one to just do on a rainy day because it's. I mean, like this is the third movie of his I've seen. Because we did Spirited Away last season, and we did
Totoro,
My Neighbor
the
Totoro.
other rainy day movie.
The other rainy day uplifting movie. Yes, exactly. And this reminded me a lot of My Neighbor Totoro. Both of those I just feel like are just, if you're having a down day, these are great movies to watch. I agree with you with the art too. I mean, I guess we'll start there. I just thought the art was so amazing. Especially, I mean, it carries throughout, but I just remember seeing like the scenes where they're in the town at the beginning, and was just like, wow, this, I wouldn't even want it to be a live action. Like, it just feels so fully realized as an animation. I don't know why you would even, I mean, I don't think it has been done in live action. I hope it doesn't, because there's no reason to. It's just the art is so beautiful. The characters and the setting and the colors just are so vibrant. And I actually think it would be less vibrant if it was done in live action. And that really astounded me right off the bat with this movie.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I thought was really cool is one of the things that happens is that there's this magic door, right? And it goes to different places. The color schemes of each of those places were so different. I don't want to even say it was like different seasons, but it was just like the whole landscape was different, and the wastes where it's all rainy and cold, and then you have the spring like later on. You've got the bustling city. I really appreciated the use of color for each of those different settings.
And then like each of the different places in the city that the door is like connected to, everyone has kind of distinct uniforms and stuff like that. Like you see soldiers walking around at different points in the movie. There's some that are like blue and some that are green. But yeah, very colorful and very detailed.
For those of you who are listening and are like Danny and me who haven't seen this movie yet, it's basically, just to give a quick synopsis so you know what we're talking about. It's basically a movie about a young, I guess, is she a girl or a woman? I
she's
think
like
she's a woman.
17, 18.
Yeah, so she's a woman. She's actually the older sister, even though the other one has like makeup and stuff. She goes, I'm the oldest, so I had to take care of the hat shop.
Ah, okay, you're right. That rings a bell.
So
she looks younger.
Because the younger sister has a full face of makeup, and she's super busty and real pretty. She compares herself to her sister constantly. That's why she's like, oh, I'm not pretty. And I'm like, you're just different. Just because you look different and you're not super busty and wearing a ton of makeup doesn't mean you're not pretty. That was one of my favorite ideas of the movie, is that beauty is not a set like standard, you know? It's different, and people can be different and beautiful differently. They can be beautiful in different ways. It was like one of my favorite parts of this, because like one of the first things you hear is, oh, Howl, you gotta watch out. He's kind of like a legend, or like a fairy tale, like, ooh, watch out, he'll get you, he'll steal your heart, blah blah blah. And no one really knows him. They just hear all these things, these rumors, whether or not they're true. Oh, it's okay. He only steals pretty girls' hearts. And she's like, well, I'm not worried about it. And I'm just like, honey, no. And I love her. I relate to her so hard. She's just a sweetheart, and she like wants the best. She doesn't ask for anything. She just wants to be nice to be nice. She's very genuine, I think.
She has this low self-esteem that as a kid I especially related to. Like, I mean, I still do, but like as a kid watching it, I was kind of like, oh, poor Sophie. She's very introverted compared to her sister, who's very outgoing, and all the guys like, hey, where's your sister, and stuff like that.
Yeah, everybody's talking about her, talking to her, waving, like she's just the center of attention all the time, which makes sense why Sophie's just so like withdrawn and like quiet. She's like, oh, well, she's gonna get all the attention. I'm not even gonna like, you know, and that, I don't know. I think that she took that as, oh, I'm not pretty like her because she gets all this attention. You know, she's just outgoing. wears makeup. Like, that doesn't mean nothing, you know?
But then you were talking about character development. Even fairly early on, you can see Sophie, once she kind of meets the rest of the main cast, you see she's got a little bit of sass to her. She's got a little bit of bite.
I
she'll
love
keep people in
her.
line.
My favorite dynamic was Calcifer and Sophie, because she's sassy and he's sassy. And he's like, well, I don't have to listen to you. And she's just like, I'm going to use my wit to, like, outsmart you and just show you how silly you're being, basically. And it's just so good. And even Howl's like, he's listening to you. That's an accomplishment, basically.
And like, he tries to come off as intimidating. He's like, I'm a scary and powerful fire demon, but he's just like a little tiny fireball. And then you see how helpless he really is.
He's
like,
precious. He's so precious, because he's like, oh God, I'm gonna burn out. Help me, I'm dying. And she's like, you're fine. Calm down.
And he's like clinging
relax.
to the last log.
Oh my gosh, so good.
And the little coal is like dangling with his tiny feet hanging below. And Sophie's blaming him for stuff. Cal's like, oh, how did she get in here? And then she's like, oh, Calcifer let me. He's like, what? No, I didn't. But like, she keeps everyone in line. She kind of becomes the mom of. Or she is the mom of the group, basically.
She becomes the mom figure, essentially, because she's like, this place is a mess. And Hal's like, don't get too carried away. And, like, that comes to, like, one of my other favorite scenes, I'm sure we'll get to. But back on track a little bit. What? I'm rusty, okay?
Sorry, we're brushing off the cobwebs. Yeah, well, so again, if you aren't familiar with the movie, Sophie is the young woman. And the whole theme of the movie is inner beauty, but not. What I liked about it is I'm definitely a believer in inner beauty and everything like that. Although it's also been done a lot as well. I felt like this one wasn't. It was doing it in a way that wasn't. It didn't feel like it was forced down your throat, but it was very, very evident, and I think very, very well done to showcase Sophie's inner beauty. Because the whole premise, without spoiling anything, because it's like the first 15 minutes, is she's put a curse is put on her, where she's turned into an old lady, basically, at the end of her life. And so she kind of wanders and finds Howl, who lives in a walking, call it castle. It looks like a cottage thing. I don't know. Maybe that's a castle.
It looks like a hunk of junk, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's a hunk of junk. But anyway, she ends up with Howl, who is a wizard who is reputed to be an evil wizard. And neither is the case. Howl's not an evil wizard, and Sophie's not an old lady. Both have to kind of find their inner, what they are really underneath that.
I would argue that I don't think the main theme is about, like, inner beauty so much as things aren't what they appear. Because right off the bat, Sophie's not an old lady. Her mom isn't this doting, sweet mom. She's never home. Calcifer isn't a fire demon. This house isn't what it looks like. It's a magic house. It doesn't even look like, it looks like a hunk of junk, you know? The little boy, he's not an old man. The Howl isn't Pendragon and all these other names. Like, he's none of that. And he's also not this heart-eating, stealing, bad man. And it's funny because he himself doesn't have a heart. And it's quite literal, actually. He isn't heartless in the aspect of he doesn't care about people, because he feeds everybody, and he cares about this little boy who he's teaching, and he cares about Calcifer, and he even cares about Sophie, who's in trouble in the first 5 minutes of the film, and he saves her.
That's true. Yeah.
And so he's not what people say about him, and she thinks she's ugly, and her self-esteem is just in the toilet, basically, and she's not, and she's caring, and she's, you know, it's just so many dimensions of this whole idea of things aren't what they seem, and that includes inner beauty, I think, because each of these characters has their own warmth.
That made me think, actually, that I'm pretty sure almost everyone of the, like, named major characters, they've got something that it turns out to not, what you see is not what you get.
Especially, like, curses and stuff. Like, curses are so big in this.
Even the villain, the Witch of the Waste,
turns
out to not be what you originally think she is.
All these kind of people kind of make a ragtag group, and they eventually kind of see each other for what they are, and they still make things work somehow.
One of the things I want to get to is spoilery. Like, really spoilery.
I was going to say, I feel like we do need to put a spoiler warning.
I was going to say, because it's a movie, if it was a series, I wouldn't say, like, spoilers, but I think we're going to say spoilers after this.
I think so, yeah. Oh, for those, again, new listeners, we tend to try to steer clear of spoilers in the series, but movies, a little difficult to really dissect without spoilers. So, yeah, I guess from here on out, if you haven't seen Howls-Moving-Castle and don't want it to be spoiled, I would stop listening, go watch Howls-Moving-Castle, and then come back and listen to us.
Yes. Okay. So, one thing that's huge that I loved how they did, and it took me the second watch to realize it, because I started picking up on it in the first watch, and then the second watch I was like, okay. So, one of the things is that she's cursed. You don't get told what this curse is. Essentially, you're thinking, oh, it just makes her an old lady. But then why does she change sometimes? Why does she like look younger sometimes? Why does she, she changes throughout the movie. She has probably, much like Howl, like 4 or 5 different looks throughout the entirety of the movie. And I realized as I was picking up what's happening during each of these scenes, it's how she sees herself. It's her confidence level and the way that she's asserting herself, her confidence in general, whether it's about herself or how she's feeling. Because one of the first times is when she's helping Howl, and you see her, she was like this hunched over, super droopy old lady because her confidence is in the toilet. And then she's with this little boy who's appreciating her help, and Calcifer who's joking around with her, and you start to see like some of her wrinkles start to go away. She stands a little straighter, so she's like more like 50, 60 and not 80, 90. And then when she's getting excited with talking to the main magician woman in the king's court, she gets mad. She goes, "You don't know anything about Howl." And when she says that, her whole face like shapes itself to be younger for a split second. And then her confidence gets knocked down and she turns back into that old lady. And that's immediately what the magician woman basically saw through. She goes, oh, I get it. You're in love with him. Because she gets so passionate. She gets so full throttle that she forgets about feeling ugly, and like, because she's in love, so she forgets that she feels ugly, because love makes you feel beautiful. And I thought that was like so well portrayed in the way that every time she was trying to help, every time that Howl was like sick or hurt, she would like get younger. Or when he surprised her with the fields, and you would understand why that's important later on. And so many things happen, and she just becomes like young. I mean, she still has the white hair, but she becomes this young character. And I think it's really cool the way they did that with the young and the old, and fluctuating based on how she's feeling about herself and her confidence throughout the movie. Also, the way that the hair color of them basically swaps, and kind of their position swaps, because they're helping each other in different ways. And
Howl and Sophie, you mean?
Yeah. So I don't know. I really appreciated the use of the color, like the hair color, and the use of like the old versus young, like to differentiate different milestones, I guess, throughout the film.
I didn't notice some of those instances, like on first viewing, like you were saying. There was a few that you brought up just now that I'm like, oh, okay. Because when I first watched the movie as a kid, I was like, how come she's old sometimes and young sometimes? And then I remember a few years ago when I was rewatching Howls-Moving-Castle, I looked that up because I was like, what is with that? I never figured that out. And then it was like you said, when she's feeling more confident, then she transforms into a younger version of herself. There were still a few scenes where I'm like, I'm not really noticing it. And then, like you pointed out, like, oh yeah, you might not get that earlier.
Or even when she's asleep, because she sleeps and Howl walks past her and she's all normal. So he knows she's cursed.
Yeah, like I remember that one because I was like, wait, but she's asleep. How would she? Okay, yeah.
Because she's not actively, it's more of a curse for her. It's not a curse for anybody else. Like, nope, that's the point, because it's not described. That's why it's important, because it affects how she sees herself, because she already sees herself that certain way. Yeah. And when she's asleep, she's not really thinking about how she feels ugly or not worthy or whatever, and unlovable. And it's sad to see that, because her mom's character is really upsetting to me. She's such a minor character, but it says so much the few, like, 2 scenes you see of her. And I don't know, it's frustrating, because, like, you see why Sophie feels that way about herself, because her mom is just too busy chasing love, chasing men, materialistic things, and she's not that way. So she's like, well, I'm not materialistic, maybe I'm not lovable, you know, and it's so sad.
That's, I guess, why I said inner beauty, because I didn't mean it as necessarily like, oh, well, you're a good person and it doesn't matter what you look like. I meant like the inner beauty in the fact that, like, your true self, or your what you have to offer, what your true power is, for lack of a better term. Because I went through the same thing kind of Graham did. As I'm watching it, I was like, wait a minute, did she just get younger? Or I thought she looked older. Like, because when she first turns, like, she's like, I mean, like, wrinkled, hunched over, like, I mean, her nose is big. It's definitely pronounced that she's older. And then, like you said, some scenes she shifts back and it looks like she's just like maybe in her 40s, 50s at most. And then other times she looks like she's like 100 years old. And I was a little confused. And then I kind of realized the emotional tie, like you did, Danny. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's cool that they keep, again, with the animation, shifting so seamlessly, because no one takes notice in the movie and everything like that. But I was still confused as I'm watching the movie. I'm like, well, wait, so like what? Her love does that? Like what you did? So then I looked it up, and I was surprised to find out this is not a Hayao Miyazaki original. This is a novel that he adapted. It was based on a novel by the same name, written by a Welsh author named Diana Wynne Jones. And Hayao Miyazaki wasn't even going to direct it originally. It was going to be Mamoru Hosoda. But he's
Mamoru Hosoda.
Okay,
there you go.
That.
Yeah, it was supposed to be him. He dropped out
Crazy.
suddenly, and Hayao Miyazaki took over. We'll actually be
I'm
doing.
glad, though.
Oh yeah, it so fits him because it's so magical, and we'll actually be doing a Mamoru Hosoda. Is that
Mamoru Hosoda?
Mamoru Hosoda. We'll be doing The Girl Who Leapt Through Time later on the season, so we'll be checking him out. But so I don't think I've seen a movie of his, so I can't tell. But Hayao Miyazaki seemed like such a good fit for this. I was like, who thought about giving it to anyone else? No offense against this other guy who I haven't seen any of his work yet. But
yeah.
But anyway. The book, though, makes it very clear and outrightly states it, where the movie just kind of leaves you to infer it, is that Sophie is a witch. So that is why she is able to reverse the spell to some degree and break it while she's sleeping.
What?
Yeah, Sophie's actually a witch herself. It's not made overtly clear in the movie, although
I need to rewatch this movie with that in mind.
I know. I was missed as soon as I found out. I don't know how they don't mention it in the movie, but you're supposed to infer it because that's why she goes back to younger, because when she feels confident and she's, passionate and she's reaching into her true self, she can actually reverse or even break the spell, like while she's asleep, because she's her true self. She doesn't have all those programs that her mother put in her to make her feel down. So because she was she doesn't have those programs right, she breaks the spell because she's a more powerful witch than the Witch of the Waste. And that's why she's, again, we're in spoiler territory, so that's why I can say this now. That's why she's the only one who can save Calcifer and Howl at the end, because she's a witch, and so she can do it without killing both of them.
I know that the listeners can't see me right now, but I'm having epiphany faces. What? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also
I'm
why
losing my mind right now.
Yeah, that's why she gives Calcifer her hair. And as soon as Calcifer's like, you need to give me everything, for me to do what you need me to do. And she just gives her her hair, like a lock of her hair. And he's becomes super powerful from it. Oh my God. Because we're supposed to, from all these things, realize she's a witch, just like Hal's a wizard. But yeah, they never outrightly state in the book. They outrightly state that she's a witch. She comes from a woman with witches.
Okay. So my thing that I was going to mention about the book was not nearly as exciting or flattering. So
That's
One
why
of
I'm
the-
sitting here when you're talking about it, both of you, and I'm like, oh God, you don't know, do you? I can't
Oh
wait
my
to
god, no, I'm like losing it right now. That's wild. Okay, well, fun. That was fun fact.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, it
that's-
makes me want to. I want to watch the movie again now
Right?
too.
I'm
'Cause
gonna
now I
watch
can
it
be like,
for a third time in like
right,
2 weeks.
because
It's
now you
great.
get so much more depth, and that's why I, like I said, took it as inner beauty, because it's like she found her like power, like her gift,
Damn.
basically, through her
Damn,
experience.
damn. That's wild.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in this show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
I thought it was really funny that Howl was such a crybaby because everyone thinks he's this, again, with the whole things aren't what they appear. Everyone thinks he's big and scary and and super powerful and wild and super badass, and which, I mean, he is, but like, he's a big old baby.
Oh
he
yeah.
freaks out when his hair dye gets switched around and his
He
hair
threw such a man tantrum.
Okay, keep in mind, this boy, I'm going to say boy because he's acting like a child. This boy, he straight up freaks out. He's like, "You ruined me. Life isn't worth living if I can't be beautiful," which like follows that whole idea that like Sophie was like, "Oh God, if you're not beautiful, you're not worth anything," kind of thing. But she's just like, calm down, you're fine, your hair doesn't look bad, it's just a weird color, it's fine. And he's like, "God, what's the point?" And he sulks so hard he starts melting. Like, come on, how childish can you be right now? He starts calling on the shadows of darkness with his soul because he's so heartbroken that he's not beautiful. And it's just like really are you gonna be like this? She has to like physically help this man child.
Yeah.
The flight of stairs, he's all gooey and melting, and she's like, "Get him in the bath, he'll be all right."
He's literally like emo melting in the shower.
Like, such a physical representation of his like, "Oh God, what's the point?" And it was just, I was just like, "Oh my God!" And I was actually reading somebody had posted like a blog about the book. He's even more dramatic in the book. He's a bigger crybaby about so many things in the book, and he's so childish, and you're just, wow. People love Howl, which is fine and cool, and I love Howl, don't get me wrong, but the whiniest man-child. And that's why when Graham was like, "She's like the mother," I'm like, no, she's like the mother. She's like, pick yourself up and get it together, because you're a grown wizard. You have so much power, and you're gonna use it to sulk.
And in that scene, the boy, like his apprentice Markle, even says, like when the shadows are coming up and he's starting to, he's like, "Oh yeah, I saw him do this once when a girl broke up with him."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think
forgot
that
about
was like to allude to like what happened in the book. I think something similar happened like that. Like he's not used to having whatever his heart, quote unquote, broken, like or someone reject him because he's so vain and it's so obvious. And I really do want to read the book now because like that just sounds ridiculous. Like it's so good. I love it. I love when things are just so much not like what they appear as. So good.
Yeah, I already wanted to read the book originally because I remember growing up watching this. My neighbor who introduced us to Studio Ghibli, she owned a copy of the book and she let my sister borrow it, but I never got to read it myself. And now that you mentioned like how he's even more dramatic in the book, and Matt was mentioning how Sophie's a witch in the original story, I'm like, okay, now I gotta check it out. But going off of kind of Howl's childish behavior, it makes sense when you kind of get that flashback or kind of time jump later in the movie.
And that's what makes sense now that I'm thinking about what he said. She's a witch. She's able to freaking go back in time. Like, so something that I also realized is that ring, it amplifies her power. Now that like you say that, I'm like, because he goes, this will lead you home, but at some point she's in the home and it's leading her elsewhere. It's more so it's leading her to Howl. It's leading her to her like deepest desire. Oh, and she wants to help him. So it's following her command essentially.
I hadn't thought of it like that. I guess I kind of thought of it as it kind of guides her to the castle or to like Calcifer, because later in the movie when they kind of jump back in time, it kind of leads her to the place where young Howl and Calcifer are when Calcifer first comes down and meets Howl, and they make the pact and Howl gives him his heart. And I don't know, I hadn't thought of it like that. I was thinking earlier, maybe the reason why Howl is so childish is because he gave up his heart at such a young age. Like he was just a little boy when he gave up his heart, and maybe that's part of the reason why he's so childish.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh God. Okay, so that whole like this is one of the things I did want to talk about was that whole scene with her kind of like time jump. Keep in mind the first thing he says to her, I've been looking everywhere for you. And I thought that was him playing the part of, oh, this is my girl, and I'm gonna save her from these big scary soldier men that are like trying to take advantage of her. But no, when you think about it, she went back in time with whatever powers. He remembered her, and he found her. He's the one who found her, and it's just like my heart. Oh God, I can't. I'm so overwhelmed with feelings right now about it.
In the past few years, I made that connection because I think she says, because right before like the time jump kind of ends, she says, look for me in the future or something along those lines. And then when he's like, oh yeah, like I've been looking everywhere for you. He's just like very casual about it. And it seems kind of like a write-off at first where it's like, oh yeah, he's playing the boyfriend. And then it's kind of recontextualized after you've seen the movie before.
You don't see a lot of things that do time travel that simply and that concisely and that beautifully, and it doesn't make a mess. It's open and shut. It doesn't cause a bunch of chaos. You don't have all these extra questions. You're just like, this makes sense, and it's great, and it's beautiful, and without that time jump, the story wouldn't have been the same. Like, oh God, I can't.
I'm not a fan of time travel at all. I still, to this day, and this might horrify some people out there, I still to this day have not seen Endgame because I refuse.
Endgame?
Marvel.
Yes.
Because I refuse to do time travel. Now we'll see how this goes when the girl left through time, which I'm sure is about time travel, but we'll see how I stand with that one. But yes, I agree with you, Danny. Usually I'm a huge downer on time travel because anything I've tried to read on time travel, it sounds cool. They so just muddle it up, and I'm like, I'm too logical. I gotta figure it out, and I can't just be like, yeah, sure, this guy shot this guy and then somehow got in the future and he gave birth to. No, I need something that makes sense rationally for me to hold this together. But this movie, I do agree with you. They did it beautifully. You don't even realize it until like after you finish watching the movie.
That's how seamless it is, because usually time travel, you're like, this doesn't make sense. How is this a thing? thing, but it's just done so well. Oh my gosh, that you don't even question it. It's so seamless. Ugh.
I think from what I remember, it's been a few years, that the girl who left their time actually handles it pretty logically.
We'll see.
But in Howls-Moving-Castle, that scene is so brief. You don't even realize like it's in the past for a minute. You just see like the falling stars and Sophie's out in the field. That is the field you see earlier in the movie when
Yes!
Howl's like all the different areas through the portal in the castle door. And he's like, hey, yeah, I found this place for you, or field full of flowers. But you don't even see anything that indicates that Sophie is in the past until the scene's almost over. You see a young boy, and then you kind of look at, oh, that looks like Howl. And then you see him holding something in his hands, and then right before the scene ends, they both turn to the camera. Oh, that's Calcifer and Howl. And then she's like, look for me in the future, and that's it.
I am a huge fan of symbolism in stories.
Yeah, same.
And fair warning to our listeners, our next episode, there will be a lot of symbolism talk. So if you're not a fan of it, you're warned ahead of time. But staying on this one, there's a lot of symbolism in this story, which I really, really like how they did it. And again, was kind of the same way with the time travel almost. I didn't realize it until after the movie was done. You're like, oh, not only are we dealing with, since this is a Victims and Villains podcast, we'll talk a little bit of mental health here. I mean, not only are we dealing with, obviously, Sophie, there's probably people out there besides me who kind of maybe were programmed to think down on themselves during childhood, I'm sure. And, you have to kind of get rid of those tapes that play over in your head, that you're not good enough, that you can't take care of yourself, that you're ugly, that you're weak. We all have our tapes that we got to kind of erase to realize our true potential. And, not only were we dealing with that aspect, but Hal's a mess too, psychologically.
Yeah.
And Sophie kind of has to, that's why I love I didn't even realize it until afterwards when I was reading up on it. But when Sophie first reaches the castle, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier. She's like the mother. She cleans everything. She's like, I'm going to clean up this place and everything like that. And it was literally trying to clear out the clutter in Hal's psyche. That was symbolic of that.
Yep, that's exactly what that was. It was so messy and dirty, and like same thing with in his room. If you look in his room when she walks in there, there's like little trinkets and little pieces, and if you look really closely, there's like teddy bears and kids' toys, and you're like, oh my god. And it makes sense so much later because his life or his heart, it was gone at an early age. So all of the things he enjoyed are probably in there, like toys and little kids things. Not like rattles, but like little toy boat, teddy bears, and all these things are in this big old room. It's so chaotic and cluttered in his room. And she's kind of looking around, and that symbolism of later on when he runs off, and I think it might be a dream when she has that nightmare, and it kind of turns into like this chasm of this tunnel of the conglomerated walls of all these pieces of Howl, essentially, in his childhood, and all these toys and just knickknacks and things. Those are little pieces of him, but it's this dark hole. And that's kind of symbolic for his depression that he's in at that point, because he's turning into this monster, which he literally feels like it is, because he doesn't like war. And he's like, because there's one point she goes, is that battleship ours or theirs? And he goes, does it matter? Because it's a pointless war. And you don't realize it until you really pay attention what the war's over. It's because they can't find the sun because he's been cursed.
Yeah.
They can't find the sun, so this war is pointless. And that's the whole reason that there's a war. It's the first, in the background of the movie, while everybody's talking, it's the first minute and a half. They're like, "Oh, did you hear? They're ready to go to war because they can't find the prince." And it's a big deal.
That's what the reason was.
Yeah, that's the whole reason there's a war. And so Hal's like, war's stupid. I don't want to participate. So he's running. And so when all this happens and he's forced to fight, and it's turning him into this monster, quite physically, mentally. So he's in this dark hole, and it's just all so symbolic, like the literal manifestation of him turning into a monster, and then, along with that hole of darkness.
I think it's in that scene too where Sophie actually sees him, and he's that giant monster bird, and then she's like, "How?" And then he's like, "Don't look at me."
Yeah.
Because he's so ashamed of like what he's kind of turned into,
Yeah.
but Sophie's able to kind of
Awful.
restore him more to what he really is.
Which makes sense as to why he's so vain when he's in his like normal form, because he knows this monster he's slowly turning into by having to work for the king and help the battles and the fights, even though he doesn't want to. It's so symbolic because he feels himself turning into this monster. So he pretends to be this beautiful man who's got like white hair and just, all these things, when at the end of the day he turns into this monster. And so it's this facade he puts on. It was I don't know. The symbolism was. I could go on and on about symbolism as well. So I appreciated it a lot.
Well, maybe I misunderstood. I thought because I did get a little confused at this point, so maybe I misunderstood it. But I thought he was part of, because there's two countries, but I think it mainly focuses on the one where we see that are at war, and the one where we see he was a part. He was in training to be like the, I don't know, like sorcerer,
the grand
sorcerer, yeah, for the kingdom and stuff like that. And then he kind of ran because he didn't want the war, I guess, or something like that. And that he was kind of being hunted by them, and so he became this bird creature and kind of tried to like stop the war from destroying towns because he felt so guilty about once being a part of that mechanism. So it kind of like,
right, in
addition to him losing his heart as a child, it was kind of like a guilt thing he had on top of all that.
Oh, for sure.
Increase his depression.
But even Calcifer says the more you turn into this creature,
right,
you're not going to be able to come back. Like, this creature is how they're winning the war, because he says, all the others have turned themselves into monsters for the king. He says that at one point.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
So it makes me wonder if that's like a power, and eventually they turn themselves, kind of like when your mom's like, if you keep making that face, it's gonna stay that way. Kind of like that whole idea. If you keep fighting this war and being this monster for the king, you're gonna stay that way, whether it's physically or mentally. They don't really explain, which I don't think they need to, because the symbolism is intense and great throughout the whole movie. But you see it later when he shoots off a power and his arm stays all like scaly. You see it, and it physically manifests on his arm, and he hides it behind him, and Sophie kind of sees it, and he's all ashamed of it. And it was just, is it like a physical? Is it like mentally? There's so much to kind of read into about it. Either way, it's a pointless war. Howl even's like, I don't want to be a part of this, but because she trained me, I signed this thing that was like, I gotta fight for you. And it's so sad. That's why it's the black door.
Yes.
Nobody's allowed to go in there. Black, bad, darkness. It's so symbolic.
Dark psyche. It's
and
dark
that's
psyche.
One that's full of smoke and flames and stuff. Like, when how, like, at one point he steps out, he turns into the bird form, and he flies out of that into the battle.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
One more thing I wanted to just kind of touch on before we ended it. The whole idea of it kind of ties to the symbolism. The idea of a heart. One of my favorite things is, and I'm sure everybody who's ever seen this movie knows this quote, but a heart's a heavy burden. Because it's so true, because it's this big idea that Howl's cursed, essentially, and he's got this heart that he doesn't have. And whether it's the fact that he has it or not, it's a heavy burden. And then when you think about it, she cares about Howl, Sophie. So she's all stressed out and she's trying to help him, and she cries sometimes and she's scared for him, and saying like a heart's a heavy burden. Like, this is a burden that you choose to have when you're not thinking literally. When you love someone, that's a burden you willingly take on because you care about them. So their worries become your worries, and their well-being becomes your important, things that you have on your plate. But you choose that because you love them. And so that whole idea of like a heart's a heavy burden it was just so poetic and simple and beautiful, and it so much packed into just such a simple sentence. It was just, I love it.
There's one more thing I wanted to add that I think kind of puts a nice bow on Sophie's character arc in the movie. At the beginning of the movie, she ties so much into her appearance and, oh, well, no one would ever love me. I'm ugly. And then by the end of the movie, you see she has this found family. And it turns out not only does Hal love her, but the lost prince who she met at the beginning of the movie, who's been turned into Scarecrow she names Turnip Head. Doesn't he say something like, your love turned me back into my true form or something? Or
yeah, and that kind of makes sense that she's a witch, because I'm like, oh my god, she was so kind to him from start to finish. And it turns out he's the prince. He goes, I'm going to go end this stupid war, basically. Yeah. But it was your love that enabled me to come back to who I was. And I was just like, oh my god, she's amazing. And I love this prince, and I love all the things.
Yeah, and then he sees that that his love isn't reciprocated, and he's just like, okay, whatever. Anyway, I'm gonna go in the war. See you guys. Thanks for helping me.
Right? She's like, well, I already love somebody, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna go end this war. Bye. And I'm like, that was like way too easy. That was really sweet, but oh my god, that was intense because he's such an important character, because he's the one who essentially helps her find Howl's castle, essentially. And he helps her when she feels like she has no one, and she helps him when he's in need, and it's just this cohesive friendship they have, and it's just my heart.
We could also talk about Calcifer and Howls and their connection too with the harp. I mean, heart's so central to this. I think besides inner beauty or inner power, or things aren't what they seem, it shows that the heart is really the most powerful force there is, because it's really Sophia's heart that kind of heals Howl, ends the war, does all these amazing things.
Powers the castle.
Yeah, powers the castle, literally. So, I mean,
yeah.
It just shows the power of love. And again, that's why I guess I was saying at the beginning, power of love is so, I mean, not that it's not true, or not that I don't enjoy seeing it, but I mean, it's done a lot, but I just did it, I think, in a new way. And I really appreciated the way.
Yeah, it was refreshing.
Yes, exactly.
For sure.
Refreshing is a good term.
And because, kind of rounding back out to what we were talking about at the beginning, kind of like the way things change throughout the movie, and this metamorphosis of both appearance and characterization and relationship, and just everything kind of changes throughout the movie. And my other favorite quote was, the thing that you can always count on is that hearts always change.
Right.
And I thought that was a beautiful, it was one of the last things in the movie, and I thought that was a really good way to kind of wrap it up, because essentially, whether it's Howl's heartless, or Sophie thinks she's not good enough or pretty enough, and she's not confident, all these things throughout the movie, they're changing for the better by the end. And yeah, hearts will always change, and I thought that was just poetic as well.
Yeah, I mean, Sophie didn't think she was lovable. For lack of a better term, that's essentially what she thought at the beginning of the movie. And as soon as all those characters, including Sophie, let love in, change occurred. We're talking from the Witch of the Waste all the way to Howl, to Sophie, to Calcifer.
My God. Also, for a quick second, the fact that Sophie just takes the Witch of the Waste in when she becomes this helpless old lady was just really sweet. It just shows how selfless she is. She's all bitter about it for all of 5 minutes. And then she's straight up spoon feeding her, and
And the dog too, because the dog, remember, is a double agent. And then she's like, well, I don't trust you for like, she does that for like 5 minutes. And she's like, all right, fine, you can come along with us.
Right? And even Howl's like, do we have to bring them? She's like, well, I guess they're here now. Like,
Yeah.
And this whole little ragtag family. I know we touched
Yeah.
a lot on found family last season, but I just, as somebody who, my main family is essentially my found family for the most part, it's so important to capitalize the whole, really appreciate, I don't want to say capitalize is the right word, but really like focus on the importance of found family, because these are the people that they don't have to love you, they don't have to support you, but they choose to because they think you're worth it. And I think that's really important to kind of take away from that, is that even if you're down on yourself, you don't feel like you're lovable or you feel important, like somebody out there thinks you are. And I think that's, at the end of the day, what we all need is someone who thinks that we're everything, even if we don't think we are. And there's somebody like that out there for everybody, whether you found them or not, whether they are your actual family or not. Like, just the fact that you love somebody and they love you, whether it's platonic or romantic or whatever, I think that helps us see the beauty of ourselves, and it helps us with our confidence. It helps us feel stronger, like just like Sophie. So,
and I would say it's a two-way street, or at least that's what's shown in this movie, and I
Yeah.
also believe it too. I mean, it's not only being loved, but giving love, because Sophie gives love freely, and then it's returned to her throughout the movie. And I think that's, and that happens to kind of all the characters. As soon as they give love, and allow love to be received, they give love, or, it depends on which character, but as soon as they basically allow themselves to be loved and they give love, that's when things start changing for the better.
And I meant to mention this earlier when we were talking about love breaking the curse and stuff. That same thing happens in Spirited Away, if you'll remember.
That is true.
When Haku,
Yep.
when he's controlled or whatever, and then they're like, oh, what's wrong with him? And they're like, oh, that curse or whatever, you broke it. That other thing you were worried about, that wasn't anything. It was your love that broke the curse on him.
And it was like nothing because she didn't even think about it. But yeah, no, that seems like a common thing. That's, honestly, I wouldn't doubt that Miyazaki like decided, that's his name, right? My brain's like,
You're asking me.
yeah, it's been a long day. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's like one of the reasons he chose it, because it kind of fits his MO. Ponyo's the same way.
I mean, I was shocked when I read it wasn't an original, like that.
Yeah.
It was a book originally. I'm like,
Same.
really? Because this seems right up his alley.
There were some things that like he kind of tweaked or like made kind of relevant based on world events. Like part of the emphasis on the war in this was directly in response to what was going on in Iraq in the early 2000s. And I think he won an award, like an Academy Award for this. I can't quite remember, but he refused to show up as part of the protest against that. And I think a lot of the emphasis on being against war and being for love and the power of love and the power of the heart and its ability to change was all tied in. And yeah, like you said, fits his MO very much, as you see across his body of work.
Honestly, I think it's just a powerful movie that really accentuates the strengths of Miyazaki as a storyteller, artist, all of that. And I will say it's probably top 5 anime movies. I really appreciated just the use of symbolism. Time travel surprised me, but they did it in a good way. And just the change, the physical character changes and the emotional character changes and the relationship changes. It was really well done, and I wasn't left with a lot of questions, so I dig it.
I think that does it. That was another heartwarming masterpiece from Hayao Miyazaki. There you go, Hayao Miyazaki.
We've only done 3 things by him so far.
but I think they're all masterpieces, and we'll probably be doing at least one more this season too. So if you're also a fan of his, as you can tell, the three of us are, but if you're also a fan of his, stay tuned for another one of his. But yeah, I think that covers this movie for us. So we made it through our first episode of season 2. Yay!
Did it? We got here.
Next episode, we will be celebrating Wolfie Newt, which is its real holiday. It comes out in New Zealand. You can look it up if you've never heard of it before. But to celebrate Wolfie Newt, we will be doing the series Wolf's Reign, which none of the three of us had seen before we decided to do that episode. So I think it's came out in the early 2000s. It was one of those, for those of you who listened to last season, it was one of these ones that like I saw on commercials for Cartoon Network. So it was released in Cartoon Network in the early 2000s. And it's basically about, well, we'll get into what it's about next episode, but essentially it's about a group of wolves looking for paradise. And let's just leave it at that, because if we go any deeper, we're going to be here for another hour and we won't have anything to talk about next episode. So, so join us for that, especially if you are, like me, a wolf fan. And I will warn everybody, we will be talking a lot of symbolism and we will be talking a lot of wolves next episode. So till then, you can reach out to us with any special requests, or you want to add to the conversation, or just say hi at animindpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to follow us, in between episodes, because you just can't get enough of the three of us, where can our listeners find you?
You can find me at Danny Ari Cosplay on Twitter, where sometimes I'm funny, sometimes I disappear for months. And then Kittens and Caffeine on Twitch, which I have done intermittently.
And you can find me on Twitter at MadShellfish2, and surprisingly, shocker I know, you'll find me posting nerdy stuff about like anime and fighting games and stuff like that.
I've actually, since last season, joined Twitter as well. I think
One of us.
I think, Graham, I think we've talked about how to eat pizza and how to put the toilet roll up, put the paper roll properly so far.
The objective way to put a toilet paper roll is over, and I will not elaborate further.
Yeah.
Unless you have cats. Sorry.
That did come up a lot in the heated conversation that was on Twitter. But besides those burning topics that we all need to really kind of address, I also you can follow my writing. I'm a writer. I have a short story called Burden that was published in an anthology called This Is Halloween by Free Minds Publication. It's available on Kindle. And I have a novel. My novel's coming out December 15th, called Dreaming. I think when we did the live episode, I think I said it was November 23rd, but it got pushed back. And I also have an episode of, it was just released, the 4th episode of Emotional on the Victims and Villains Mother podcast you can listen to as well, called Pleasure's Ecstasy. So if you need to keep track of all these writing things I got going on, you can follow me on Twitter at Matthew A. Basil. And basil is spelled just like the spice, but with an E on the end. So also, if you want to follow our parent company, Victims and Villains, you can go to victimsandvillains.net. There you'll see links to their Facebook, Twitter as well. They're also joining the Twitter party, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube accounts. Victimsandvillains.net also has movie resources, movie reviews, podcasts like the one you're listening to right now. And most importantly, our mental health resource library is available on victimsandvillains.net. So you can get help in case you don't have a Sophie to declutter your messed up psyche like Howl is fortunate to have. So that will do it for our first episode of season 2. Until next time, keep both your mental health and anime on the mind.